Social skills for the overthinker. Beat self-sabotage, escape your comfort zone, and get out of your head. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton. Imagine for a moment a golden Labrador puppy. Picture in your mind how such a puppy moves in the world, what it does, and how it treats every new encounter. Can you envision it bouncing excitedly from one new thing to the next? Can you see how it explores, runs around, and puts its nose all over the place, sniffing everything? The way a Labrador puppy explores its environment is the same way that all healthy animals explore theirs, human animals included. The natural default mode for organisms of all kinds is to engage with the environment, to seek out mates and food, to explore and uncover something new and unknown, to ask, in a way, what's here for me? If this vitality, engagement, and interaction with the environment is what characterizes normal, healthy animals, then it's detachment that characterizes unhappy, unhealthy ones. When people are depressed or anxious, they're not engaged with their environment in this way. They lose their interest in the world and in other people, and turn only inward. They lose any lust for life, any striving, and any ability to interact, even physically moving less. Try to imagine, then, that anxiety is a problem of misdirected attention. Every being comes into the world with energy and life in them, and they can direct this toward actions that help them achieve their goals. They use this energy to solve problems, to overcome adversity, to create new things, to power their learning, and ultimately, to get them what they want out of life. But sometimes this energy gets turned inward and gets trapped there, perhaps in endless loops that go round and round and never seem to amount to anything. For the socially anxious, the curious state of mind is like medicine. It gets you out of your head and back into the world, where you can start acting, engaging, learning, creating, communicating. In fact, some theorists say that disengagement from the world is not a symptom in depression and anxiety, but a cause, i.e., people become depressed or anxious precisely because they have forgotten how to engage with the world in healthy ways. In the previous section, we looked at an example of post-event rumination. The truth is that such rumination is most likely to happen when the interaction was one where the person wasn't genuinely engaged. Anxious people tend to live 50 worries behind. Basically, they lie awake at night, unable to sleep, because they're not focused on their current tiredness and how comfortable their bed is, but on how anxious they felt at a party yesterday. But the only reason they were anxious at the party yesterday is because, instead of being at that party in the moment, they were focusing on how anxious they were and all the annoying things that had happened to them earlier in the day. So there are two problems. One, anxiety keeps you away from the real present moment. Two, it keeps you trapped elsewhere, i.e., the past, the future, or some hypothetical place that doesn't really exist. You set up painful feedback loops. You're not engaged in the moment, so you don't connect with others or the situation at hand. This leads to post-event rumination, which, in happening, again, keeps you out of the present moment. You are continually living 50 worries behind. The way to break the cycle is to put your attention back to where it is meant to be, the present. Be your authentic self and respond naturally and spontaneously to whatever the other person shares without overthinking it. Speak whatever comes to mind, fully immersing yourself in the conversation and making the other person the center of your focus. treat the interaction as the most captivating and engrossing conversation you've ever had. You may even find it's worth going further than you would think appropriate. Say something unconventional, unexpected, or a little risky. Don't stew over what you're going to say. Just say it. Use feeling talk rather than stating dry facts. Give your opinion. When you're complimented, enjoy it and accept it. Let other people see that it gives you pleasure. When you don't like something or disagree, say so. Don't make it a big deal, just state your case. Don't bite your tongue. People who are socially anxious waste all their precious energy and time scanning and monitoring themselves. Am I sitting weird? Do people find me boring? What does my face look like right now? Do they like me? Did they find that joke funny? Instead, turn all that energy and attention onto things in the environment. What is the other person saying? Look into their eyes and try to take in the entirety of their message, the content, their emotions, the subtler points they may be expressing. Don't think about what you're going to say next. Just sink and immerse in each present moment, feeling how full it can be. Take the Labrador puppy as your role model and become curious, nosy even, and ask lots of questions. The secret is that curiosity and anxiety cannot exist together. Exploring your environment is moving toward approach behavior, and anxiety is moving away, retreat behavior. When you're anxious and worried about what threats there are in your environment, you are not exploring that environment, but protecting yourself against it. A few more tips. Try wonder spotting. Head out one day and go wonder spotting. Take your camera or phone and imagine putting on a curiosity lens so that everything you look at seems new and interesting. Is there beauty, wonder, intrigue, or humor out there? All these engrossing things are here in the present. When you engage with them, you're not engaging with worries from the past or fears from the future. Once you're a pro at this, try to apply the same mindset to social situations. When you walk into a room crowded with people, consciously tell yourself, "Ooh, look at all these interesting people talking about such fascinating stuff." Sure, you might not believe it 100% at first, but it will still help you make the shift from perceiving threat to opportunity. There's a kind of fatalism in anxiety, a lack of creativity. This is because when we are afraid, we're usually operating with the feeling of knowing that the worst outcome is the one that will happen, and the least enjoyable interpretation is the one that is most true. But thinking this way shuts down all the possibility and wonder of the unfolding moment. In truth, anything can happen, and we don't always know how a situation will turn out. Try to move away from, "I'll fail," or "they won't like me," boring, foregone conclusions, to a more open, more wondrous feeling of, "I wonder what will happen next." This reframes uncertainty and open-endedness as enjoyable and even exciting. Practice empathic curiosity. People who are good with people have learned to look at other human beings as depthless sources of wonder. Really, it's not that they universally like all people, but rather they are willing to be surprised by them. They hold it as a distinct possibility that people can be kind, delightful, interesting, entertaining, inspiring. That there is a potential for good feelings, even though there may not be an instant and easy connection. Socially anxious people, however, don't give others this chance. They have concluded with certainty that other people are judgmental, difficult, alien. Without ever checking to see if their assumptions are correct, they put thoughts into the heads of strangers and then imagine those thoughts as enormously critical and harsh. They make judgments about social interactions that haven't even happened yet. Use empathic curiosity to challenge anxiety-driven assumptions about others. Instead of jumping to negative conclusions, wonder about the thoughts and feelings of the people involved, recognizing that everyone's experiences are unique. Be willing to acknowledge that someone out there might be having a thought you haven't ever considered having yourself. Be open to the possibility that others can have interesting things to teach you, and that they might be genuinely interested in knowing more about you, too. If you feel anxious about interacting with new people, employ empathic curiosity by wondering what might be going on in their lives and how they might be feeling. Turn away from your own internal ruminations and engage. It's this engagement that might convince you that so many of your assumptions are unfounded. If you merely stay within your own head, though, you never give yourself the opportunity to test your assumptions against reality. Become an emotional detective. Combat anxiety-driven catastrophic beliefs by thinking like an emotional detective. Deliberately look for evidence that contradicts your anxious thoughts and consider alternative explanations for situations. Take that anxious self-talk voice in your head and put it on the stand in a court of law. Where's the evidence? Is what it's saying strictly true? If you're anxious about a social event, challenge your beliefs by asking yourself for specific evidence that supports your fears. Look for instances where social situations have turned out positively or differently from what you expected. Most of us are familiar enough with the tenets of CBT to know that sometimes our thoughts and beliefs can be distorted or incorrect, but our emotions can be distorted too. You may notice that you feel as though there's a big group that you are excluded from. Setting aside this feeling, however, is this really true? Does your feeling of not belonging necessarily mean that you have been objectively rejected, or even that there is a big group at all? Practice curiosity-driven self-compassion. Use self-compassion to unlock curiosity about your fears and worries. Acknowledge your anxious feelings without judgment, and explore the underlying reasons for your anxieties. If you feel anxious about attending a social gathering, practice self-compassion by placing your hand on your heart and just tune in to how you feel. Take your emotional temperature and peek under the hood of your own thoughts and see what's there. You do this not so you can castigate yourself for not thinking or feeling what you should, but rather so that you can build awareness. Many socially anxious people falsely believe that they are very self-aware. The truth is that they are self-conscious. When you're deeply focused inward, you're actually less aware of what is going on in the world. And even though you may be hyper-focused on what is happening in your own head, it doesn't mean you have a good handle on it. Self-compassion means a degree of acceptance. It means you notice yourself ruminating anxiously in the moment. You say to yourself, "Oh, look, I'm ruminating again. That's okay. I'm just turning my attention outward again." That's all. Self-compassion means noticing when your attention has gone awry or where you've become hypnotized by your own negative self-talk, and just treating that with calm, relaxed indifference. The idea is not to beat yourself up when you notice that you are anxious. Instead, be glad when you become aware of your overthinking, and smile on the inside as you gently pull yourself back to the moment again. Be kind to yourself and recognize the value of that moment of awareness, rather than judge the lack of awareness that came before. The next time you're in a potentially stressful situation, play a little game where you deliberately turn all your attention and awareness outside of yourself, away from your internal ruminations. Become the fascinated puppy and sniff around everything. Look people in the eye. See if there's anything that seems interesting or juicy or fun or intriguing, and follow it. If you do this, you might notice that later on, when the event is over, you feel much less inclined to return to it and ruminate over how it went. You don't need to go back, because you were there the first time around. Do the opposite. When we're anxious, we behave as any sane person would behave in the face of a threat. We retreat. We escape, avoid, or, if we can't get away, hunker down and adopt a protective stance. Though this tendency is a good idea for things that are genuinely dangerous, it doesn't help us when we're facing something we only perceive to be dangerous. Anxious people tend to do something to try to escape. They want to get away from the situation they believe is creating that discomfort. And eventually, they also want to escape that feeling of discomfort itself. They seek safety. And while avoiding the thing they fear may feel good, in the sense that they do avoid that anxiety, what they're really doing is teaching themselves that there really is something to fear. They are reinforcing their incorrect perception. To recover, we need to do the opposite. It follows that facing your fears is literally the last thing you want to do, but it must be done precisely because doing so will start to teach you that your original appraisal of the situation actually wasn't accurate. Opposite action engages you with the world in a specific way. It gives you the chance to gather up new experiences that go against your assumptions. For example, you may have the belief, "I hate socializing. It's always awkward." Unless challenged, you'll go on having this belief, and especially go on thinking that socializing is a scary, unpleasant thing, and it's always more comfortable to stay clear. But if you push yourself little by little to socialize, you start to gather up episodes where you didn't in fact hate it and experience moments when you weren't awkward but perfectly comfortable. Gradually, the belief starts to shift. The key here is that it will be uncomfortable, by definition. If you want to cancel on a social event and stew at home instead, don't. Go out. If the store looks crowded and you want to turn around and run home without doing your shopping, don't. Head in there and get it done. If you want to cancel your vacation rather than having to deal with the airport, don't. Make a plan and get on that plane. This is the only way to convince yourself that there isn't any danger. Again, it will feel uncomfortable. You may sometimes feel like kicking and screaming all the way through it, but do it anyway. It doesn't have to come easily. You don't have to like it. You might feel sorry for yourself and watch your mind come up with 4 million excuses and justifications for why you really, really cannot do it. But do it anyway. Then, when it's done, pause for a moment and ask yourself, was it that bad? Did you cope? Did you maybe even find that once you got going, it was far more manageable than you thought? This tactic is all about recognizing that excuses are just more avoidance. just take a step back and notice the stories you're telling yourself. Sometimes when anxiety is really pronounced and has been embedded in place for a long time, people can convince others very well of their excuses. For example, those with agoraphobia might shut down any suggestions that they leave the house with accusations that they're being bullied, that nobody understands them, that people are being cruel. Nobody understands how genuinely valid their reason for not going out is, and so on and so on. The point is, however, to be committed to not fooling yourself, even if you can fool others. You might be able to make an excuse and tell people you're sick or that you have to work or whatever the case may be, but be honest with yourself. Can you gently challenge your excuse, not for their sake, but yours? In CBT, we acknowledge that thoughts, behaviors, and emotions all mutually impact one another. Change one, and you change the other too. That means that if you change your behavior, your thoughts and feelings cannot help but be affected. Sometimes when we're anxious, we sit around and wait until we feel better, assuming that our thoughts and feelings have to be just right before we can act. But it can also go the other way. By acting first, we can gradually start cultivating the kinds of thoughts and feelings we want. This may seem counterintuitive, but it works. When you feel anxious, behaving in an anxious way only makes you feel more anxious. However, if you engage in opposite to emotion behavior, you dampen that anxiety. Let's look at a step-by-step process for opposite action. Step 1. Ask if the thoughts and emotions are helping you. Emotions are there for a reason. They keep you safe and inspire you to values-driven action, but not all emotions are this useful. Some just get in the way. Pause to discern what kind of emotion you're feeling. Is it appropriate to the situation? Is it going to bring you closer to your goals in any way? You may, in fact, decide that it can. For example, your anger is useful because it allows you to assert boundaries that keep you safe. But if this is honestly not the case, then opposite action might work. Step 2. Find your urge. Emotions push you to action. What is this emotion urging you to do? Often, social anxiety pushes us to retreat, avoid, escape, withdraw, hide, or shut down. Notice what this urge is and define it clearly. Step 3. Engage completely in the opposite of the urge. This is important. You're not trying to do the opposite of the emotion, but the opposite of the urge, which is an action or a concrete choice. The urge could be canceling an outing, avoiding a difficult conversation, lying about how you feel, biting your tongue, turning down a much-wanted job promotion, or taking 4 days to respond to an email. Look at the urge and do the opposite. Go on the outing. Have the conversation. Share how you really feel. Speak up and tell the truth. Accept the job. Or write an immediate response to the email. And when you do it completely. No half measures. It's worth pointing out that none of these actions is good or bad in themselves. For some people, going to a social event is their initial escapist urge, and their opposite action would be to stay home and face what they're avoiding there. Step 4. Give the opposite action a chance, then reappraise. Really commit to that opposite action and give it a fair try. It's okay if you're feeling terrified and want to scale things back a bit, though. For example, your urge is to cancel the party and not show up at all. The opposite action here is just to go to the party. But you can agree with yourself that you will go and stay for merely an hour, or even just half an hour, if you're really intimidated. However, once you've decided, make that deal with yourself and follow through. The point is not to punish yourself. This will only further cement this idea as negative in your mind, but to give yourself an opportunity to experience something other than anxiety. When you come back from the party, note how you feel. Is it any different from before you went? Did the event play out differently to how you imagined? Take a look at your beliefs, thoughts, and feelings about this party and see whether they still hold. You probably won't spontaneously turn into a social butterfly overnight, but you will gradually chip away at the distorted beliefs and thoughts that are not really serving you. The next time you catch yourself saying, "Oh, but I hate socializing. It's always awkward," you might not believe it quite as much as you did before. A caveat: let's say you do have an issue with going to parties, and you follow the above steps exactly as they're written. You head out to this party and have a bad time. Now what? Well, try to remember that the point of the exercise is not to force yourself to feel a way that you don't feel. It's about breaking down the impulse to avoid and escape, i.e., what you do, not what you feel. In this sense, the moment you leave your house and head to the party, the experiment has been a success. How the party turns out is secondary. Another subtle point is that we are trying to develop a realistic, healthy attitude to the environment. And let's be honest, sometimes the outside world is boring, difficult, stressful, or unpleasant in some way. Sometimes we worry that we won't have much in common with people, and it turns out we don't. But that doesn't mean that engaging was wrong. You're trying to teach yourself that social interactions, although they may be unpleasant and not what you had hoped for, are not dangerous and not a threat. In other words, they're not something we need to actively avoid in order to protect ourselves. It's a little like weather. Sometimes we may get caught in the rain, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't ever go outside or that there aren't great things out there that we want to interact with. If you find yourself experiencing a genuinely unpleasant social situation, then seize your chance. Here's an opportunity to just sit with your feelings without trying to escape them. Don't worry about pretending that you're enjoying it when you aren't. Don't fold in on yourself trying to guess what you did wrong or chastise yourself for XYZ. Just notice how you feel, accept it, and move on. The trick is to see that even if social situations are difficult or boring sometimes, it still doesn't mean you have to escape or avoid. Perhaps you come home and adjust your belief. Man, I really dislike boring get-togethers like that. But you can never tell how an event is going to happen. Oh well, I still enjoy some kinds of socializing, and the next time may be more fun. In this way, socially intelligent and well-regulated people are actually masters at dealing with disappointment and discomfort. They feel the unpleasantness, but they don't generalize it to anything else. They don't assume it means something awful about themselves or about others, and they don't treat it as a threat to be avoided in the future. A little tip: you may find that you enjoy social situations far more when you're able to spontaneously and authentically experience and express your own true emotions. For example, if you're feeling tired, don't force yourself to act more energetic than you are. If the conversation feels dull, speak up and try to share something you're passionate about. If you're not being listened to, be a little forceful and don't allow others to interrupt you. If you engage in this way, assertively and honestly, you may find that you enjoy other people far more. You may discover that what you were trying to avoid was the effort of being inauthentic. This has been Social Skills for the Overthinker. Beat self-sabotage, escape your comfort zone, and get out of your head. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2023 by Nick Trenton. Production copyright by Nick Trenton.